Welcome to Get to the Hook. I am your co-host, Charles Latibeaudiere.
And I'm your co-host, Eric Colley.
So we are now in December, and that means it is time for two things. One, everyone starts thinking about the holidays, holiday hits. That's not what we're covering today. The other thing we start to think about at the end of the year is all the greats that we've lost in the previous year. And we did lose quite a few this year, although compared to recent years, there weren't as many sort of tragic deaths.
True. There were a couple, but
there are losses nonetheless. And, it doesn't, I know sometimes young people like to go like, well, they were old, and it does.
Yeah.
That's not what we're about here. What we're talking about is your contribution to the musical tapestry of our lives. And we did lose some greats in that aspect.
Enough that this is going to be a two-parter.
Oh, there you go. There's a tease.
Because, we are doing part one this week, part two next week, because, when you see the in memoriam on the Grammys or the Oscars, and it's just a picture and a name, and it just slides by while somebody sings some maudlin song, and there's always the complaints about who got left out. I wanted to give these people a little bit more than that.
Yes.
We're not going to do full biographies or get into the whole thing, but just some significant people.
Why they were so important in music history and their moment in music history. Right?
Some were one-hit wonders. Some were, some of the greats of all time, but they all contributed something.
I say one-hit wonders. The name I always hate because it is a pejorative to it,
it's
right?
A negative
you
connotation.
Only had one hit.
Right.
But when you think about some of the really big songs in your life that every time you hear them, you're like, oh, I love that. And it takes you back to a moment. A lot of times they're one-hit wonders. And guess what? So they occupy an important part of your brain.
Absolutely.
Right?
And one hit is one hit more than most artists ever get.
Still waiting for mine.
Yeah.
Still waiting for mine.
Keep on. Yeah. Well, I hope you get there before you join this list.
And all right. Well, thanks.
Also, another thing at the award shows is they always do it by who's the bigger people, and they try and position them at the end.
Yeah.
Which it's a popularity contest, which is really weird for people who've died.
And they're producing a television show, and so they want the big applause at the end or the tearful moment. We're not going to do that.
No,
we're going to do this in respectful chronological order for the year.
Chronological order. We're going to go back through 2024. We're going to go back to January, and we are going to go today, January through July. Significant people who died. And again, like I said, some are one-hit wonders, some were huge artists, some were producers, some were infamous, some were influential behind the scenes, but all contributed something, and we want to acknowledge that today.
Well, let's dive in.
Let's dive in. Going back to January 4th, the year started, not even a week into it, a guy died, David Soul. And he is best remembered as Hutch.
As an actor.
From Starsky and Hutch, seminal, influential cop show from the 70s. Mm-hmm. Had that sweet car, the Gran Torino, the red car with the white...
red with the white racing stripe down the side, yeah.
And the show was criticized at the time for being too violent, which it seems kind of, tame today.
Oh, yes, if you see a clip.
Oh, absolutely. And it got a little goofier as it went on for 4 seasons. But I think you can say Starsky and Hutch was sort of the stepping stone that got you to later shows like Hill Street Blues or Law and Order or even The Wire. It kind of took a little bit of a
gritty.
Yeah.
Yes.
For its time.
Exactly. For its time. Definitely a gritty look at crime in the city, which is the polar opposite of maybe that's what
why
David
we're
Soul,
talking about him.
Which is maybe why David Soul just said, you know what? I'm not when I'm going to do my music, I don't want it to have anything to do with Starsky and Hutch.
Right. Hutch was this hard-boiled detective kind of somber guy. David Soul secretly always wanted to be a singer. That was his first passion, and he kind of fell into acting and became most famous for that. But he had a moment. As a singer, in April of 1977, he got all the way to number one. David Soul had a number one single with this song, Don't Give Up on Us.
Don't give up on us, baby. We're still worth one more try.
I'm not a huge fan of that song, if I'm being honest. And that's not a disrespect to David Soul. He sings it very well. It's well produced.
It had its moment.
And in context, in 77, when it got to number one for a week, it was sandwiched between two of the greatest dance floor fillers of all time.
77, so we're talking disco era.
Disco era. You have Don't Leave Me This Way by Thelma Houston goes to number one.
Ooh.
Gets booted out by Don't Give Up on Us. And then ABBA's Dancing Queen hits number 1.
Oh
last
my
week.
gosh.
So, you get tired dancing. You got to stop and catch your breath.
You need a break.
You need a
break.
David Soul.
You need a, hey, just couples only. Couples to the dance floor. Come on out, lovers.
Right. So yeah, not my favorite song. Not gonna crap on it, but
I do.
but it was a
remember it from
moment.
Childhood. I remember that song.
yeah.
And-
So
Look, it was. I read something the other day, and maybe not the other day. There's my age when you start saying when you get to a certain age,
other
you go
day
like
was-
the other day, and
it was
like
2006.
yeah, it was like years ago. In this case, months ago, when he passed, and I didn't realize how much bigger his music career was in the UK
Much bigger.
than it was here in the US. Like that's really the only song that we remember him.
That
for
was
in
his
the
only
US.
big hit in America.
But in the UK, he was a hit maker.
Yeah, he had a good run in the UK.
Yeah.
So it's great that he wanted to be a singer, became more famous as an actor, but still got to have a genuine big moment as a singer. So R.I.P. David Soul.
R.I.P. David Soul. And I like the song. I get your point. Super sappy, but
I don't hate the
I dig
song,
it.
but I'm not gonna be like, man, I got to put on "Don't Give Up on Us." I got to hear that song. That's my jam. January 19th, Mary Weiss died at the age of 75. She was the lead vocalist for the Shangri-Las, who their biggest hit, maybe their best known song, at least for several decades, was "Leader of the Pack," with the motorcycle revving
Sure.
in the laundromat. But probably what younger people would know her for now, and this is a little convoluted, but I'll try and get to the point. The Shangri-Las had another big hit called "Remember Walking in the Sand." Over the years, it was covered by Aerosmith, the Beach Boys, the Go-Go's did versions. And then in the 2000s, Capone, the rapper, pitched it up a couple tones,
right.
sampled it, and then in 2020, another rapper named Creepa sampled the Capone version, and it's now, that song wasn't a hit, but it's been seen millions of times on TikTok. Every video that has the oh no, that little bit in it,
Yes.
that is Mary Weiss's vocal pitched up from Remember Walking in the Sand by the Shangri-Las, sampled by Capone, sampled by Creepa. So Mary Weiss has been viral on TikTok for about, 3-4 years now? That song still pops up.
Wow, mind blown. Did
So when
not
you
know
hear that little vocal sample on TikTok or anywhere,
Oh no.
yeah, that's Mary Weiss. She was the lead vocalist on that song. So yeah, she died at the age of 75 in January. January 23rd, also lost another artist of the 60s and in the early 70s, Melanie. Just went by the name Melanie. She was part of the hippie age of music. She performed at Woodstock. It was a cool story that when she performed, there was a huge rainstorm. Things got muddy at Woodstock.
Yep.
And all the hippies were lighting candles up and trying to cover them to keep them burning through the rain while she performed. And she was so inspired by that, she wrote a song called "Lay Down Candles in the Rain." It was her first top 10 hit. That was not her biggest hit, though.
No.
In 1971, she spent 3 weeks at number 1 with a song that I think either you love it or you hate it.
I love it, and but for the longest time, all due respect to Melanie, who has now left us, I thought this was someone else who we'll get to in a moment. But
Okay, well, whether you love it or hate it, it will stick in your head. I warn you now. This is Melanie's brand new key.
Well, I got a brand new pair of roller skates. You got a brand new key. I think that we should get together and try them out, you see.
would you believe that is anybody's go-to song in karaoke?
No.
I have a friend who.
I was hoping you'd say it was you.
No, it's not me. It's not me. But shout out to Jill. It is her. It's actually the only song she sings in karaoke.
Really?
Yes, and doesn't need to look at the lyrics at all. Knows it at all.
It's
the whole
such a
thing.
specific vocal. Does
Mhm.
she try to imitate that voice? And
Yes.
that's- okay.
I'm not going to say whether or not she succeeds because she might be listening. But yes,
I'm sure
it
she
is.
sounds amazing. I'm sure she sounds just as good as Melanie.
So it is a very specific song, and it is a big time earworm, whether you like it or not. Like you said, for the longest time, this is before, I will admit, this is before I really understood who Janis Joplin was.
Yeah.
And
You
the
thought it was
history of her. I just assumed, I don't know, it was just the era, and
I
obviously
get,
Janis was
it's kind of a scratchy, rougher vocal.
yeah.
I mean, Melanie was much poppier than Janis Joplin.
Yes,
but
it's-
I could see the confusion
Once
there.
I learned more about who Janis Joplin was, I was like, wow, I was way
Well,
off.
I mean,
That
I
was
told you a
definitely-
couple of weeks ago I confused Marvin Gaye and Boy George. So when I was a kid,
Okay, I don't feel so bad
smooth
anymore.
vocals,
Yeah.
No, I get it. But yeah, Melanie passed this year. Also in January, actually on the same day as Melanie, January 23rd, one of the most infamous people we're going to be talking about, Frank Farian, the nefarious Frank Farian.
Yes.
So he died at 82. He's a producer and a singer. In the 70s, he started a group called Boney M. It was a disco group. He did the male vocals, hired some female vocalists, had a bunch of huge hits, bigger in Europe than they were in America. Rivers of Babylon, Rasputin, Ma Baker, a bunch of big songs. So Frank was the vocalist with this deep, low vocal. But he hired a dancer named Bobby Farrell to perform with Boney M and dance on all their television performances. This was before music videos. And so people thought Bobby Farrell was the singer of Boney M. He was not. He was just a dancer. Bobby wanted to sing on the next couple records, got tired of lip syncing. Frank said no. Boney M fell apart.
Why? Why does this story sound so familiar?
Because about 10 years later, Frank Farian, long after Boney M, thought, why don't I just do it again? But not with his own vocals this time. He had a couple of session singers who recorded some songs. He thought they were very catchy. Hired 2 dancers from Germany to be in the videos, and it became Milli Vanilli.
Yeah.
And
guess what? It worked again.
It worked again, even bigger.
Yeah, even bigger.
Milli Vanilli had
Huge
3 number
success.
1 hits in 1989, 2 more top 5s. They were huge, but there were always the rumors that they didn't sing. And obviously, when you saw them in interviews, they could barely speak English. And then they would sing these songs with no accent whatsoever because the original singers were American.
Right. I think if people knew more about Frank Farian's history and his involvement in the Milli Vanilli project, they would have known this much, much sooner than they did. It wouldn't have taken a lip syncing disaster for everyone to figure out these guys are not really.
I mean,
singing.
we should have known right away. Honestly, that's on the public. We were really dumb not to get that right away.
When you look at them, and once you know the guys who were actually singing, it's like, those voices were not coming out of. But we didn't know.
But
we didn't know.
It makes me sad that, Rob Pilatus and Fabrice Morvan, who were the 2 singers, quote unquote, from Milli Vanilli, the performers, were so villainized. They were sued. Rob Pilatus eventually died of a drug overdose just a few years later. Frank Farian, meanwhile, in the late 90s, started another group called No Mercy, had a big top 5 hit with the song Where Do You Go? Frank was fine.
Yeah.
He skated right on by.
Because he was the guy in the background and nobody. Rob, you're right. Rob and Fab were the faces of this. They got huge success. They got recognition. They didn't necessarily get a crap ton of money.
No.
So when it blew up, they became the faces of it. They
got all the
remained the
backlash.
faces of it, and they got all the backlash while,
Frank was
just
fine.
went on to his next project.
Yeah.
Frank was probably like, been there, done that. This is, so what? All right, you got me.
That was always his attitude. He goes, this has always happened in pop music. Who cares? And honestly, I agree with Frank on that. I like those Milli Vanilli songs. I do. I have a lot of nostalgia for them. Those Boney M songs are great. I don't care who sang them.
Yeah. And by the way, we should, since this is an in memoriam, and we don't want to speak too ill of the dead. Guess what? Frank Farian is not the only person in music. Lots of producers have done this.
Of course. Martha Wash, who sang for C&T Music Factory and Black Box and all these early 90s dance groups, she was the vocalist on all these songs and was never in the videos, never got credit. It's just what happened back then.
Yeah.
And probably still does today with people we don't even know about.
What's his name? I'm blanking on the name. Wall of Sound.
Phil Spector?
Phil Spector. Phil Spector did this with girl groups.
Oh, yeah, the Crystals, and it was actually Darlene Love singing a song. And it happened all the time.
Happened all the time.
As long as the music's good and the right people get paid, who cares?
Right. Exactly.
So R.I.P. Frank Farian.
What we mean to say is R.I.P. Frank.
Well, I didn't mean who cares about him. I mean, who cares about...
Exactly.
You know what? He did produce a lot of good music.
He produced really good music, so we thank him for those contributions.
Swinging...
regardless of how it came out.
Yeah, swinging very far away from Milli Vanilli and Boney M. Wayne Kramer died in February at 75. He was the guitarist for the Detroit group MC5, which stood for Motor City 5. He was ranked as one of Rolling Stone's 100 greatest guitarists of all time, and the MC5 never had huge hits because they're now considered one of the first, if not the first, punk bands. And you can hear it. Their biggest hit got to number 82 in 1969, but most people know this song.
Pretty good for a...
This is Kick Out the Jams.
Kick out the jam! I have to kick 'em out!
It doesn't sound like 1969, really.
No,
it's
that does
heavier
not.
than Hendrix and Led Zeppelin, I think. And also that song, famously at the beginning of it, starts with an F-bomb dropping, which you can't say on the radio now, much less in 1969.
Yeah.
That was very punk. Sadly, though, also, not only did Wayne Kramer die this year, their drummer, Dennis Thompson, died in May, 3 months after Wayne. So every member of that group is now gone.
Wow. Sad.
Yeah, forerunners of punk.
Yeah. Look. If you don't know about him, look into the Motor City 5 a little
Yeah.
bit. You will hear a lot of bands that came after them that were clearly influenced by their sound.
Oh, absolutely.
I hear lots of groups when I listen.
Very influential group. February 5th was one of the biggest deaths of the year, one of the biggest artists to die this year. Toby Keith died at 62, country icon, 20 number one country singles, 30 million albums sold in the U.S. We talked a lot about Toby, around the office and stuff, obviously, when he died. And he was very beloved, was also kind of polarizing because he got political, but not really.
Not in a way that I don't want to say he was exploited, because he believed what he believed, but I feel like the songs that he sang, he was singing what he felt, but then
He was
there
from
were
an army
certain
family.
people, right? It was from a military family. So
yeah.
there were people who decided they were going to take that song and make it like an anthem.
It was. So the quick backstory, we won't get into all of Toby Keith's life. I mean, he was big from the beginning. His first single in 1993, Should Have Been a Cowboy, was a number one country hit. It's a great classic country song from the 90s. And he was big for the rest of the 90s, but he was always sort of like B and C tier amongst country stars. Then he started to get much bigger in the late 90s with the song How Do You Like Me Now? And then after September 11th, he just became the face of patriotism for kind of for the rest of his career. The song that he's probably most known for amongst most people is the song Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, The Angry American. It came out in 2002, and it represented what a lot of people in this country were feeling. They were very angry about the September 11th attacks. And the most famous line from the song, I think one of the most famous lyrics of the 21st century, because of the historical importance too, this is the line I'm talking about, and you know it from Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue.
'Cause we'll put a boot in your ass, it's the American way. Hey, Uncle Sam, put your name at the top of his list.
Look, you can say what you want about that. Not some people will say didn't age very well, but there weren't a lot of people who disagreed with that.
Well,
Regardless of your political affiliation, who disagreed with that sentiment in September of 2000.
I think a lot of people still agree with that sentiment. And
Clearly.
we saw the battle of it. Probably the worst of it with Toby Keith was after the Dixie Chicks in 2003 said they were ashamed of George W. Bush. He was sort of at the forefront of that campaign to get them off country radio. He hated the Dixie Chicks then. Yeah. And I think he eventually kind of mellowed on that and apologized for it because he was cancel culture going the other way. He got them canceled. Partly, I mean, radio did
certainly
themselves.
Does, yeah.
But Toby Keith, I know there are people, when he died, people were like, oh, they hate this guy. I think, like most people, he was a complicated person. He seemed like a nice guy. He and Stephen Colbert were really good friends.
Yeah.
Very close friends. And if nothing else...
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a lot of people today who should be thankful for Toby Keith. Toby Keith basically put on Taylor Swift.
Yeah. Big Machine
Taylor
Records,
Swift.
He co-founded that. She was one of the earliest signees to that. So Toby Keith indirectly, well, not even indirectly, kind of directly gave us Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
So maybe you hate him for that. I don't know. Depends on if you love Taylor or not.
Or maybe you love him for that.
But, I
just think it shows that, people are not one thing.
They are not.
Like we say, groups of people are not a monolith, and individuals are not monolithic. They can be very complicated, and there can be something about him that you just completely disagree with, and there can be things that he does that you actually love and actually respect him for.
Good guy. Everything I ever saw about him, and honestly, I love a lot of his songs. I love This Bar. It's one of my favorite songs.
Oh yeah.
And he died of cancer. I think it was stomach cancer. And Toby Keith's thing was he was always sort of a burly dude, like just kind of a big guy.
That was his
he was a football player. When he announced the cancer diagnosis and when you saw him, the weight he'd lost and how sick he looked, it was devastating. It's heartbreaking. You don't wish that on anybody.
No, you don't. Regardless of their political beliefs or a song they think whatever, you don't wish that on anyone.
No. So he was a big loss this year. March 7th, Steve Lawrence died at 88, half of the Steve and Edie duo, his wife Edie Gourmet. Fun trivia, Steve Lawrence hit number one in 1963 with the song Go Away, Little Girl, which it's super creepy, his version, because it is about like a little girl, and he was a grown man. A little creepy. But
not a little creepy.
It's a lot creepy.
It's a lot creepy. Now,
Yeah.
What's creepy?
It sounded cute and quaint in 1963.
What's creepy today is to think about the fact that that song, and respect to Steve, there are lots of artists, and we've talked about them, who have done songs like that in that era. And what's creepy now is to go like, why wasn't that creepy back then?
I know.
I don't know why it wasn't, but it wasn't.
And the thing, Steve Lawrence seems less creepy to me because he was with his wife, Edie Gourmet, who was also an adult.
Yeah.
They were together for, 50 years or something until she died. She died first a few years ago. So Steve Lawrence didn't seem like some sort of creepy,
Right.
preying on teenage girls kind of guy. Some of the guys who did those songs back then actually were
did
doing
seem-
it. Yeah. But so in the early 70s, young Donny Osmond covered Go Away Little Girl. His version's less creepy because he was actually
Sure.
a child himself. But when Donnie's version went to number one, that song became the first song ever to hit number one for two different artists. So
Okay.
of
That's
all the songs to do
interesting
it,
bit of
Go Away
trivia.
Little Girl. Creepy song. It's
So-
not getting covered today.
So nice. They did it twice,
Yeah.
and then that's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
There's
Should
no
not-
there's no
should not be
third
done
time
again.
around for that one. March 11th. This one kind of struck me. It's a name I hadn't heard in a while, and I was just like, oh, Eric Carmen died at the age of 74. In the early 70s, he was leader of the group The Raspberries. They had a huge hit with Go All the Way. He went solo in 75, had some hits, career kind of tapered off, then had a big comeback in the late 80s thanks to the Dirty Dancing soundtrack. Hungry Eyes was a top 5 hit, a huge song. He followed that up with the song Make Me Lose Control, another top 5 hit. But probably the song, and I think you and I probably associate him with those songs from the late 80s because
We do, but I actually
we grew up with those songs and hearing them.
We
but
grew up with them, but I remember this song also as just
His
being
biggest
a
hit.
super sad. We'll play the clip,
Yeah.
and then I got to ask a question.
This is Eric Carmen's. It peaked in 1976 at number 2. This is All By Myself. Celine Dion covered that in the 90s and had a huge hit with it.
I was going to ask you what year it was because I distinctly remember being in my parents' living room and playing that on a record.
The Eric Carmen version.
Yes, the Eric Carmen version. And so 76, that would have
It
been
came out at the
second
end of
grade.
75, but it hit number 2 in 1976, early in the year.
So I was in first grade, and
I was in first year.
I
But
was in first grade, and I remember like singing along to the record and putting on, and knowing that it was a really sad song, but I didn't care.
yeah,
And like,
it's beautiful.
I remember my mother going like, "What the hell? You don't even know what this is about. Why are you singing with all this like
And he
emotion that you don't even understand?"
to Eric Carmen's credit as a piano player, he kind of backdoored classical music onto pop radio because there's an interlude in that song. The breakdown is Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, which you don't have to give credit to because it's public domain,
Sure.
but it's a classical piece.
I think that's what I was drawn to it as a first grader. It was the Rachmaninoff.
yeah.
I was like, wait, is that a
yeah, I think that's a Rachmaninoff.
interesting
isn't it?
interlude, sir?
No, that's a beautiful song, and it will outlive all of us, not just Eric Carmen, I think. April 5th, C.J. Snare died at the age of 64. He was the lead singer for the group Firehouse. They were one of the
Oh.
last of the hair bands to hit
Yeah.
in the 90s. And we talked about this on our hair band episode. They did that formula of Firehouse's first big hit was the song Don't Treat Me Bad, kind of an up-tempo rock song.
Then you got to come back with the ballad.
Then you go with
baby.
the ballad. That put him in the top 5. This is Firehouse's Love of a Lifetime.
If I'm guessing, that was 91.
That was on the charts at the same time as Smells Like Teen Spirit. And Firehouse actually survived that better than most of their contemporaries because in 92 they had a song called When I Look Into Your Eyes, also made the top 10. They were hitting the top 40 up until 95, and then it was over.
Yeah.
But they had a good run there at the tail end of that moment. So it's kind of sad to hear C.J. Snare pass this year, the lead singer.
I did not know that. I mean, I knew Firehouse, obviously.
Yeah.
I didn't know CJ as the lead singer.
Yeah. April 10th, Mr. C died at the age of 57. He's a DJ. He was part of the 80s Queensbridge Juice Crew, hip-hop collective. Was there with Big Daddy Kane in the early days of hip-hop. One of the most significant things he did for music, though, beyond that, and one of the main reasons I'm mentioning him, is he discovered a young Notorious B.I.G. and helped him get his deal with Bad Boy. So,
And he gets a shout out in, what song is it? There's a song where they're.
it'll come to you in like 10 minutes. I'm
Yeah,
gonna wait for that.
exactly. It'll come back to me.
Also, DJ Polo died this year, who was also in the Juice Crew. So kind of like MC5, we lost 2 of them this year. April 18th, Dicky Betts died at the age of 80. He was the guitarist for the Allman Brothers Band. And with his death, J-Mo, the drummer from the Allman Brothers Band, is the only living member.
Is that so?
Because, I mean, Duane Allman died in the early 70s before Ramblin' Man, I think, even came out. Greg Allman died a few years ago. So, yeah, with Dicky Betts gone, only one of the original members there left, which is really sad. Any artist is sad.
Guitar, man.
Oh, yeah. But when entire members of groups are gone, that's sad.
Yeah.
That's very sad.
Except that, as we always say, the music lives on, especially the Allman Brothers.
Oh, yeah. They will be played forever.
Yeah.
April 18th, same day as Dicky Betts, Mandisa died at 47. Gospel singer, most famous. She finished 9th place on American Idol in 2006. And 9th place might not sound that impressive, but she's one of those people that was bigger. Like Jennifer Hudson finished 7th in her year. So it's not about where you finish. But particularly the year she came in 9th. Other people eliminated that year. Kelly Pickler, who had a great country career after that. Catherine McPhee had a great career, is married to David Foster now. Chris Daughtry, who became a huge star in the 2000s. All of them lost to Taylor Hicks that year. And,
shout out to, what was Taylor's nickname?
The Soul Patrol was his
Soul
army.
Patrol, that's right.
Yeah, the Soul Patrol. And that's what helped him win, because remember, it's not, the judges
gimmick.
didn't choose the winner. It was by the viewers who called in. And
it wasn't always just about the pure, like who was the best.
No, and you
pure
figure
singer.
the demographic tended to be slightly older women mostly that watched American Idol, and they just thought that Taylor Hicks was she's just so sweet, just so charming. Daughtry he was a little too rock.
But the show was, that's how, I mean, what it really shows is how big American Idol was at that point, that you had people, like you just mentioned, who,
like Mandisa could be
who
ninth.
didn't win, but if they were on the show long enough, they had enough of an audience, because the audience for American Idol was that huge. You're on that show for, a month. That's all it took.
That's all it took. And that's all Mandisa needed. She wasn't a huge pop star because she didn't make pop music, but she was very successful in contemporary Christian and gospel, won a Grammy, which I don't think Taylor Hicks has a Grammy, but I don't even know why I'm shading Taylor Hicks now. I know,
Taylor Hicks catching strays left and right. Wow.
Whatever.
What we wanted to say was that we just, wanted to respect Mandisa's career,
right.
Not crap on anybody else's.
You're right. Exactly. April 30th, Duane Eddy died at 86, and this is one I'm going to be real honest. I thought he died a long time ago. And honestly, 86 is younger than I would have thought. His first huge hit was in 1958. He was an instrumentalist, a guitar player. He invented the twangy sound of Duane Eddy, they would call it. And his song Rebel Rouser, a lot of people don't know it by name because it's an instrumental. When you hear it, you'll know it. And not because you maybe were listening to the radio in 1958. It was in a very big scene in Forrest Gump. The scene where the rednecks show up in the pickup truck and chase him down the driveway, and Jenny yells, "Run, Forrest, run!"
Uh-huh.
The truck is blasting Rebel Rouser. This is what it sounds like. I can't hear that song and not see Tom Hanks racing down a dirt road. That's just what it is to me. But also Duane Eddy had a bunch of other hits and did the theme song from Peter Gunn, which was a really well-known song. And then that got remixed in the 80s by the Art of Noise, who featured Duane Eddy. So he had hits in the late 80s, technically. He died April 30th at the age of 86. May 7th, Steve Albini died at 61. Technically, I'm going to call him a recording engineer because that's what he liked to be called. He did not like to be called a producer, but he basically was. He produced a lot of alternative bands like the Pixies, the Breeders, PJ Harvey. His biggest thing was, because of those albums, Kurt Cobain was a huge fan of this raw, almost punk sound he could get out of artists. So Nirvana tapped him. After Nevermind, they could do anything they wanted. And the group decided, we want Steve Albini to produce our next album, In Utero. So Heart-Shaped Box, all those songs from that album were him. And he sent them a letter after they asked him to do it. And in 92, 93, they're the biggest band in the world. And he's like, well, here's my conditions for doing it. And he's like,
ooh,
I don't want the label interfering, telling, what has to be done or fixed or remixed. He's like, I want it to be the raw sound. I want it to sound like you. He goes, I don't want any of the points for the record, basically the royalties for it.
Yeah.
He goes, I don't think that's fair because you're the ones making the music. He gave up so much money.
Wow.
Because that's just who he was. He was that guy. And he always was that guy until he died.
Boy, the music business needs
more Steve Albini's. Absolutely.
Wow.
He's like, I want it to sound like you. I want it to be undiluted and I don't want too many label people and commercial people getting their fingers in it. It's just you and me, and we're going to make this record, and that's what it's going to be.
I'm sure they were like, absolutely, sir. You guys, whatever you want.
He goes, it sounds like that's what you want, so I think we're going to be okay. If not, then I won't be involved with this. Also, when he wrote this 4-page letter to them detailing how it was going to be, basically. And at the beginning, he's like, I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get back to you. He's like, I've been busy.
Wow, he's polite and
But
magnanimous.
also, you're a recording engineer / producer in the early 90s, and Nirvana's like, hey, will you do our record? And he took days to get back to them like, hey, sorry, I've been real busy. And it wasn't a power play.
Yeah.
He's like, I was producing this other record. He's like, I got to finish that. Because he didn't see any one artist as more important than the other. Like, if I'm working on your music, that's what I'm doing.
And I love the fact that he was an engineer by trade and was uncomfortable with the title of producer.
He's like, I'm not producing the music. Like,
Although
the artist is.
Some of the greatest producers were engineers. It's what helped them become great producers. But he stuck to that engineer. He wanted to be that.
It's funny, amongst great producers, this will be next week, of course, we're going to talk about Quincy Jones again.
Yeah.
We did an episode, but we have to mention him. But Steve Albini is almost like the opposite of Quincy Jones. Quincy loved to layer things and do a ton of sounds and really like make a record perfect in his way. And Steve Albini's like, let's get in, let's knock it out. And both approaches work. If you've got a skilled enough producer / recording engineer, they know how to make it sound good. And he definitely did. And just seemed like a cool guy. You should watch interviews with him. He's fascinating. May 12th, David Sanborn died at the age of 78. He was a smooth jazz saxophonist, played with Stevie Wonder in the early 70s. Very talented. And for a while there, if you heard a sax on the radio in the 80s or 90s, if it wasn't Kenny G, it was David Sanborn.
I love
was that guy.
I love David Sanborn.
Incredibly talented musician.
When I was like, I went through a smooth jazz era, and it was
shock
in the Shut up, Eric. But it was Sanborn was a big part of that. I mean, my father kind of introduced me to it, but it was I loved some of the stuff he did with Eric Clapton also.
Right.
They did the Lethal Weapon soundtrack together.
Yeah. Not Demolition Man. Was that the name of that song?
No,
that was the Sting song. It's like the others. It's gonna pop in your head.
And
like
I can
the
see them
Notorious B.I.G.
performing,
song.
but yeah.
And he also had a song called Bang Bang in '92, was a chart hit for him. So he was an artist in his own right. June 24th, talking about the one-hit wonders. If you're going to be a one-hit wonder, like we said, have a big one. Shifty Shellshock, real name Seth Benzer, died at the age of 49. He had addiction issues throughout his life. It's another one of those, you saw it happening in slow motion in real time. And it was shocking and not shocking when he died. It was very sad. Of course, he was the leader of the group Crazy Town, who only had one huge hit, but it went to number one in 2001. This is Butterfly.
Come my lady, come my lady, you're my butterfly, sugar, baby. Come my lady, come my lady.
It's a catchy song.
It's so the guitar riff is so simple, but like with the beat.
And well, the fun thing of that is, do you know what that guitar is? It's a sample.
Okay.
It is a sample. All the guitar is a sample from an instrumental song called Pretty Little Ditty by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So all the members of the Chili Peppers are credited as writers on Butterfly. Anthony Kiedis, Flea, Chad Smith, and John Frusciante. The weird thing is, the Chili Peppers, the highest they ever got was number 2 for Under the Bridge. So the only number 1 hit the Red Hot Chili Peppers ever had was Butterfly by Crazy Town.
Is that they don't have a number 1 other than that?
No. Under the Bridge got to number 2. I think it got stuck. I want to say Jump by Criss Cross is what blocked it. You know, you can be a huge song, but there's a song just a little bit bigger at the time.
Right.
Shifty Shellshock did kind of have sort of another hit, though. Paul Oakenfold, the DJ, the year after in 2002, had a song called Starry-Eyed Surprise that Shifty Shellshock was all the vocals on that song. He sang the whole thing. It got to number 41, so decent-sized hit. But it was sad to see him die this year. July 9th, Joe Bonsall died at the age of 76. And if you're thinking, who is Joe Bonsall? He was a member of the Oak Ridge Boys, and they were a vocal group, and so there was no lead singer. They would kind of trade off. He was the tenor in the group. But he did sing the lead vocal on their biggest hit. Again, talking about like notorious songs. Either you love this or you hate it, but it will be in your head forever. This is Elvira.
My heart's on fire for Elvira.
Went to number 5 on the pop charts in 1981. Mao. That's me the most famous part, but the bass singer is still alive.
Yeah.
Joe Bonsall died at 76. Actually, the first member of the group to die. Which,
this is impressive for
those
guys.
It's been the same lineup for 50, 60 years now. And for most pop fans, that's the only song they would know. But the Oak Ridge Boys had 17 number one country hits. They were in pretty much every Hall of Fame they could be in. Hugely respected, long-lived group. So sad to see him pass this year. July 10th, Dave Loggins died at 76. Not Kenny Loggins, but Dave is Kenny's cousin. And again, one-hit wonder in one sense of the word. In 1974, he had a song that got to number 5. It was his only top 40 hit. It's this song. It's called Please Come to Boston.
Please come to Boston. She said no. Would you come home to me?
Boy, man, the mid-70s.
Mellow. That's why disco had to hit so hard.
Mellow, man.
That singer-songwriter, John Denver, Jim Croce era.
Yeah.
Dave Loggins had that big hit. That was his only really big hit as an artist. As a songwriter, he was more of a country artist, which you can kind of hear in that song. That was country-leaning. Some of the artists that he wrote hit for were Toby Keith, Reba McEntire, Jimmy Buffett, Winona Judd, Alabama, Billy Ray Cyrus, Kenny Rogers.
Ooh.
Dude had a good career.
Yeah.
Wrote a lot of hits for a lot of big artists.
I gotta tell you, man, I have so much respect for songwriters like that who, and even though he had that one hit, he wasn't bitter about not having one hit. He was like, you know what, this is what I do. I write songs, and obviously people loved him, and he was incredibly successful at it.
And that's kind of the cool thing. Sometimes, and it's just perspective. If you think, oh, they just had one hit, that's sad. They didn't have a longer career. With him, it's like I had an incredibly long, very successful career as a songwriter, and then just for fun, as an artist, I had a top 5 hit. Which
that is a successful career.
And my cousin is Kenny Loggins.
Oh, and by the way,
also is pretty cool. Last one we're going to do today, July 22nd. John Mayall died at the age of 90. Leader of the Blues Breakers. Yep. John Mayall's Blues Breakers. There's a little bit of bitterness in this one because John Mayall never had any huge hits. But his band, the Blues Breakers, over the years, some of the members were Mick Taylor, who wound up being in the Rolling Stones for a long time. Eric Clapton was a member of his band. Mick Fleetwood, John McVie, and Peter Green, who would leave the Blues Breakers to form Fleetwood Mac.
Right.
Which they had a couple hits.
Yeah, one or two.
So all these artists had massive hits. John Mayall never really did. And in a 2013 interview, first of all, he said, "I'm not a talent scout." You know, like
he didn't want. Yeah.
I wasn't there just to launch other people. I have my own thing. But in 2013, he said, "Quote: I've never had a hit record. I never won a Grammy, and Rolling Stone has never done a piece about me. I'm still an underground performer." And that's in 2013. The good and sad news is he was finally, long overdue, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. They announced that he was inducted in April. He died in July. The induction was in September, October. Yeah. So he didn't get to go to his own induction because he died. Put people in while they're still here, Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, especially you got.
He was 90. He was 90 years old when he died. They started the Hall of Fame in '86. He could have been in for a long time.
Yeah, it would be. Well, I guess they need time to like sort of plan out what the thing is going to be. But
yeah, but he seemed long overdue by 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
the
lot of people
the first half of the year.
And a lot of good music, and like we said, even the ones, if you don't like them, they were a moment.
Yeah, they had
people
their
who
moment.
Made a mark.
And you know what? Even if you discover them after, again, we always say this is the great thing about music. Like, it does make you immortal in a way. And
Absolutely.
If you never heard of some of these people that we mentioned today, maybe you heard something that piques your interest. You can go find their music and give it a listen.
Yeah, especially nowadays with streaming, you don't have to hunt down a record in the record store. You just pull up Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, whatever, and here it is.
You could have paused this podcast while we're talking about it to go say,
you shouldn't.
Oh,
you shouldn't.
Don't do that. Don't do
Go
that.
now.
But now you can go back and you can find all those people and listen to the music.
Next week, we're going to finish looking at the rest of the year because, like I said, I wanted to give these people their fair due. I didn't want to cram a whole lot in. Yeah. But some huge ones that made headlines that we did episodes on: Quincy Jones, Liam Payne, some other people. Again, some one-hit wonders, some songwriters, some people who made some absolutely classic music, and we will mourn their loss next week.
And honor their music. That's going to do it for this week on Get to the Hook. We will see you next week.